Greetings to all of you. It is a pleasure to be addressing the ICG once again, albeit from across the seas. I would have loved to be with you in person, but that doesn't seem to have worked out. What I'm planning to take you through over the next few minutes is this urging that we all experience, both as researchers and as practitioners, to consider as part of our guidance activities to increase or foster or strengthen the young person's aspirations. There is a lot of research today which has focused on this particular psychological construct. Policies have been framed around the need for increasing aspirations. But is that really going to yield? Is that really going to take us closer toward helping the young person settle into a career path which is in effect an extension of himself or herself, rather than it being an exercise of keeping up with the Joneses? That's the question I'd like us to look at over the next few minutes. Another point I'd like you to keep at the back of your mind when we go through this little presentation is much of the theorizing, much of the policy building with regard to career guidance and counseling has been located around the issue and the theoretical formulations that have emerged from Western thinking, Western epistemologies. What I would like us to consider for a few minutes as a part of this presentation is how have young people and how have thinking patterns in the East, in India, for example, or other parts of Asia, how have these thinking patterns influenced orientations to career and livelihood? So those are the two main points I'd like us to keep at the back of our minds while we go through this presentation. Right? Aspiration, the handmaiden of hope. This presentation has been adapted from a paper that was written for the Danish Professional Career Guidance Journal. Hope and aspiration, how are the two linked to each other? Aspiration has been the common theme in career guidance research and practice. At the same time, the experience of hopelessness and despair has dramatically increased in the wake of recent economic turmoil. And it's not often that we have considered how the concept of hope could link with career development. And there are key differences between these two concepts which I'd like us to take a look at. Aspiration on the one hand, hope on the other. Look at the two pictures. Aspiration seems to symbolize a heading forward with a sense of purpose, with a sense of getting to the top. Hope, on the other hand, seems to be softer and symbolizes a making of one's way slowly forward. We can hope for a good harvest. We hope that our favorite team will lift the cup. We hope to win a bet. Aspirations, on the other hand, seem to be quite different. We aspire to buy a second house. We aspire to our businesses being successful. We aspire to being able to afford a better quality of life. We don't hope to be promoted to a higher position. We work hard to secure that promotion. Hope seems to be related to matters over which our control is limited. Aspirations seem to be associated with things that are achievable through planful and strategic investment of effort. To aspire is to direct ambitions toward achievement. Hope is the expectation and the desire for a particular thing to be happen or to be true. A subtle but profound difference that the career counselor could take note of. Aspirations are linked to determination, motivation, and a get-up-and-go orientation. They are linked to clearly definable behavior such as planning and goal setting. They seem to be composed of elements of competition with the desire to get to the top. The self is at the center, and the self is the prime mover. Aspirations represent the setting of goals and then directing the course of events to achieve those goals. Hope is softer, hinting at possibilities and hinting at promises. Hope symbolizes the recognition of an existing reality and then experiencing an optimistic yearning for the actualization of that reality. While aspirations seem to require plans and strategies, hope seems to rest upon faith, trust, and the negation of despair. The negation of despair is what I would like us to take a much closer look at. An interesting psychological characteristic of hope is that it seems to come on most strongly when difficulties arise. Uncertainties of outcomes causes in us a hope for a preferred result. When we are confronted by misfortune and defeat, we are concurrently subject to a feeling of a loss of hope. Indeed, it's at the bedside of a desperately ill loved one that we fall to our knees and pray in the hope that our prayers will be answered. Culminations and destinies. That's the next idea that I'd like us to explore. Hope brings us to the doorstep of religion, which at its heart is preoccupied with the ultimate destiny of humankind. Eschatology, as the theologians would describe it. In theological terms, hope is related to the recognition of one's efforts and to being rewarded. The hope of obtaining divine and heavenly rewards give the day-to-day actions that we engage in meaning, direction, and purpose. Now, there are two kinds of eschatologies, two kinds of religious families. Historical eschatologies portray a beginning, a passage of time, and an end. Islam, Judaism, Christianity are examples of religions with historical eschatologies, and they link our daily actions to being judged and being rewarded at a specific time out there in the future. Upon this judgment rests the individual's hope of eternal pleasure, eternal enjoyment of the radiance of the divine presence, or eternal fellowship and worship. These religions point to a culmination of hope at the end of time. So there is a passage of time and the thinking runs in a linear manner. The other group of religions that have a cyclical eschatology, for example Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism, do not link hope to an event in the distant future. Hope does not seem to be related by these philosophies to time, nor is it limited by temporal dimensions. And it is here I would like to draw upon two concepts from the Indian philosophies within which to view hope, aspiration and work. And this, as you will notice, is from a non-linear perspective. Samsara and karma. Karma is something we have all heard about, but karma rests on a deeper concept of samsara. Samsara describes life to be cyclical. An individual's existence, according to this concept, spans lifetimes, beginning, progressing, ending, and beginning once again. So life is an aspect of existence. Karma refers to the totality of all the actions that the individual has been and presently is involved in. It's everything that we do, everything that we have done. Life, therefore, is not seen as moving in a single direction from a beginning to an end. Instead, Indian philosophy portrays life as being a cycle that perpetuates itself. And here I came across what I thought was a brilliant cartoon that exemplifies what samsara and karma together mean. Actions of the past qualify the present, and actions of the present qualify the nature of the individual's future existence. What goes around comes around. So be careful with what you do while you're listening to me. Don't fall asleep. Hope is an integral aspect, therefore, of every action in the here and now. Now, how does it all come together? Hope, aspiration, and career guidance. The initial relevance of hope to career counseling strongly arises in the context of uncertainty, doubt, and loss. I'm sure we are all confronted by workers who have lost their jobs. And a loss of job shakes you to your core, makes you uncertain about yourself, fills you with doubt about the future, because it makes you feel that you've lost something that's very, very important. The nature of economic development today has caused the emergence of new occupational possibilities in some economies, but this has been at the cost of loss of jobs in other economies which are haunted by the specter of redundancy and retrenchment. As this young lad is saying, economists call it a recession, but for those of us who are laid off and unable to find work, it's a great depression. And look at this cartoon. It's poignant, and it places before us the dynamics of employment. Why are people given jobs? Is it for themselves, or is it for something else? Labor market cycles may push the personhood of the individual to the background. Dictated by the short-term interests of employers, where growth becomes a double-edged sword, benefiting a few but exploiting many others, employment constantly rears up its head and confronts the individual. Instilling of hope is not the same as merely supporting the development of positive thinking. Positive thinking is a psychological process of annulling pessimism. The instilling of hope from the career counseling point of view arises from empowering the individual to find a blend between the self, between personal potentials and the demands of the labor market. Engaging with the representatives of the labor market, therefore, is an important task faced by the career counselor. And what is the nature of this engagement? It's up to the career counselor to give the employer reasons to provide employment whereby the employee is seen as more than merely a factor of production. It is also important for us to reckon with the reality of false hope. In times of desperation and need, it is very possible that a hope becomes wrapped around a fantasy or a doubtful outcome. The role of the career counselor in such a situation is to help the young person and the individual realize that a particular hope may not be founded on reality. A retrenched worker could initially hold the false hope that he or she could easily obtain a similar job. The career counselor's role here would be to help the individual assess the viability of such a hope. The instilling of hope may be related to the widening of the individual's horizons and raising the possible necessity of a career shift. And here's another interesting cartoon I found. I started as a hunter, and then I became a gatherer, and now I'm a free trade lobbyist between the two. Follow-up is critical when one is supporting a career shift. Sensitive career counseling is essential to support the replanning of a career path. A middle-aged worker who is attempting to retrain and build a new career could despair when confronted by new learning methods and tasks. The role of the career counselor here would be to continually replenish that crucible of hope until the person is re-established and fruitfully re-engaged with the world of work. Aspiration, the handmaiden of hope. Hope by itself is a wish, a desire, a dream. Aspiration by itself is a self-centered roaming from one acquisition to another that could ultimately result in the loss of meaning and in the loss of purpose. If hope is to be converted into reality, and if desire is to be thwarted, it does require the individual to aspire to achieve. Hoping to recover from retrenchment, for example, is the first step. Aspiring to create a new career operationalizes this hope. At the same time, the loss or the absence of aspiration could be the first inclination toward deeper and more debilitating levels of loss of hope, leading finally to hopelessness. Within the cyclical conceptions of samsara and karma, development is not conceived as unidirectional, progressing from a beginning to an end. Instead, development is seen as a constantly regenerating cycle that builds upon earlier development. And this is a critical point that the career counselor needs to take note of. Loss of job is not a loss of everything. A loss of job does not mean that the person's earlier experience and the wisdom that has accrued over the years is lost. Hope is not the end product of a temporal sequence, but integral to daily action. It is when hope and aspiration intertwine with each other, when hope lays the foundation for aspiration, and aspiration becomes the handmaiden of hope, that career development can truly blossom. I would like to draw this presentation to a close with the retelling of a famous saying. A group of very poor people lived on an island. Their grandparents had been poor, as had been the parents of their grandparents and their parents. Poverty had been the constant companion of the sad group across the generations. Much had, however, been done by the rulers of the country to help these people climb out of the pit of their poverty. They were given food, clothing, and shelter. Indeed, the rulers of other lands, seeing the plight of these poor people, also began to send them gifts and offered relief of various kinds. The poor were thankful for the gifts, but once the gifts ran out, they needed more. Nothing really changed. The years rolled on, children were born, they grew to adulthood, and they too needed the constant support of their rulers, and the community remained poor. One day, a strange person appeared amongst these people. This person had no gifts to give, no relief measures to offer. All this person had was a large, neatly rolled bundle. "You don't need others to feed you," the other person said. The people were astounded. "What are you saying?" they cried. "Without aid, without welfare, without subsidies, we will die." The person smiled and he said, "The answers to your freedom lie within you. Follow me and I will show you." The person took the people down to the seashore and there on the sand unrolled the bundle. Some of the young people were given one end of the bundle to hold firmly. And then, to everyone's amazement, the person picked up the rest of the bundle and flung it into the sea. Nothing happened for a while. Then suddenly, "Something is pulling," one of the young people holding the ends of the bundle cried. "It's becoming heavier," shouted another. "Now is the moment," the person cried. "Pull it in, pull it in." Soon, gleaming on the sand, their scales sparkling in the sun, lay dozens and dozens of fish. Food, enough and more for all of us, the people sighed in wonder. "Yes," the person said quietly, "all you need is a fishing net, and all you need is to learn to fish." Indeed, for a career counselor in today's world, central to the instilling of hope lies the skill of helping the individual first embrace and then transform what already exists. These are concepts that we have found to be quite useful in our practice of career counseling in India. I have often wondered, although one has attempted to boost aspiration, why is it that it doesn't actually catch on? And to me, it seems that when there is aspiration without hope, it's sterile. It's just driven by acquisitions and with the desire to acquire and get to the top. Because very often, there isn't a top, is there? A top is something that's relative to the bottom, and the bottom varies from one context to another. The last thought I'd like to leave with you, which I haven't addressed in this presentation, is your young people who are not in education, employment, or training. A huge issue. I've read about it in India. I read about it in the journals and in the books. Why is it that they're not in employment, education, or training? Is there a link between pushing them to aspire when deep down inside their hopes have not been addressed? Thank you. It was Wonderful to have made this attempt to send this across to you from across the seas. Enjoy the conference, and all the best to you in your practice as career counselors. Bye-bye.